Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, February 13th, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. First item on the agenda, under item 1.1, Land Acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future, while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region Number 3. Agenda item 1.2, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? None declared, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2.1, the acceptance of the agenda for February 13th, 2023. Are there any additions to the agenda? I have one slight change. We're going to swap agenda items 8.2 and 8.3 to help with one of our presenters' timeline for this evening. Moving on to agenda item, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Deputy Mayor Pickering, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3.1, the regular council meeting minutes from January 23rd, 2023. Were there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the regular council minutes from January 23rd, 2023? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4.1, business arising from the minutes. We have the Civic Square outdoor space project update. We have our manager of infrastructure, Dustin Yanke, presenting. Dustin, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Council. So the intent of this report is to give Council information update on the current status of the project. We made some headway with the design recently, so just wanted to check in on some of the design components we've looked at, and if there's any feedback from Council, I'll be happy to hear it. Can you scroll down, Lana, to the presentation portion? I just want to touch base again. I know you guys are all familiar with this project. We've talked about it a couple times, but looking at the main seasons, summer and winter, obviously fall and spring would go along with it, but just highlighting here what the priority items that we're looking to incorporate into the space. We have the ice surface. We're also looking at putting an area for those visiting the space to put on their skates inside, which I'll touch on further. And then on that concrete space, there will be opportunities for live performances. And then the request from Council was to ensure that there are provisions for a future canopy to be installed at a later date. And then as well, obviously on the space, we could have our summer fest and outdoor barbecues, etc. And then again, further on this list, there's concession, washrooms, storage and ice plant. One of the requests was for RGB lighting, which is lighting that can change colors. And then we have a parking lot for the Civic Square building, as well as the Phase 3 development. And then lastly, we have on there EV charging, which is something that was mentioned, that we're not incorporating the infrastructure at this time, but there will be provisions in place that if funding are to become available, then it could easily be incorporated later on. Just a quick overview here for those that aren't aware or haven't seen this in a while. We have our Civic Square building in the top right there. So with this project, we're looking at developing the green space to the left of it. And then to the left of that is a future commercial space, which we've referred to as Phase 2 of the Civic Square project, Phase 3 being the outdoor space project, which we're talking about here. One of the considerations with the site layout are our westerly winds, which I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with. We get a lot of winds from the west, so we're looking at placing the support buildings, and that has become plural, which I'll also touch on the west side of the site to act as a bit of a windbreak for the ice rink. And then you see there going east-west, we currently have an alley, which is a service access road, which will be partially closed after construction. And then along both of those alleys, there are existing utilities that will be buried in the next couple of months prior to the start of this project. So this is a plan view drawing of the site. I'll go into detail kind of on the quadrants of it as we go here. So looking at the building, we have the breezeway here, just to the west of it. This breezeway was donated to the town. So we're looking at probably incorporating a little bit more landscaping than has been shown here. That was a request of the landowner, but it'll largely function as a conduit between the outdoor space and Main Street. As well, you can see there, there's the pass-through window that was put into the building during building construction. And we're looking at putting a bit of a patio space on the outdoor part of that breezeway as well. And then on the south side here, we have our patio off the exit of the building. That will tie into one of these commercial bay units, so that'll also be developed as part of this project. And then lastly, this is partially a question for council. We're looking for a bit of feedback on what council might want to see in terms of a pedestrian level entrance feature on off of 18th Street into the area. You'll see it a bit better on the next figure here. Right south of the building over here, we're looking at incorporating some sort of pedestrian level feature that acts as a gateway to the park, and solely for pedestrians. We really want that alley to look and function for pedestrians only and not have it mistaken for a driveway or an alley. So just some food for thought for council if there's any direction in terms of what they may want to see there. It could be in form of an archway or landscaping style features. So happy to hear feedback maybe at the end of the presentation if you guys don't mind. So looking closer to the building aspect and the outdoor skating rink portion, you'll see here one of the main differences from the original concept that's been shown in the past is that we've split the building into two separate buildings here. We feel that it creates more of a focal point when you come into the site and just feels more welcoming into the space. This also allows a great opportunity in the center there for a water feature, which was an item that was brought forth in community engagement. So if council is interested in doing some sort of water feature, there's options in terms of solely for aesthetics, or it could be a water feature that's friendly for children to play in, etc. So it really creates a great opportunity to have another, I guess, focal point that really brings people into the space. So the north building we're proposing would be the concession and washroom facility. And then the south would be where we would store our current backup Zamboni, which would be used to surface the ice, as well as the ice plant infrastructure. We've also changed the shape of the ice rink itself. So on prior drawings, you guys probably recall, it looked a lot like a hockey rink. So based on the feedback that we've received, hockey is not the intent for this space. It's largely for recreational purposes. And keep it in mind as well, during the summer months, we really want to maximize the footprint of that. So we feel that the rectangular shape would serve a better function. You also see there's these wooden boardwalks here. So these lead up to gas fire pits. And the intent with the wooden boardwalk is that people can wear their skates and sit down on a bench and essentially warm up if they're not skating. So yeah, by using the wood, people won't damage their skates walking on asphalt or concrete. And we're proposing 2 fire pits on the east side, and then as well 2 on the west side here. And then there's also a proposed wooden boardwalk that would allow for entrance into and out of the washroom facility, which also serves as a place for people to tie their skates. And I'll show a bit more detail on the building footprints for you guys to get an idea. Let's try to zoom in a bit. So on the left here, this is the washroom concession facility. This door would enter right into a lobby, which is essentially where people could come in to either warm up or tie their skates. Essentially be benches, potentially a little bit of storage there, a water fountain. And then on the south side here, we have 6 washroom stalls. And further to that, I did allude prior that these bathrooms would be split into male and female and more of the open style with partitions. We switched it to this style because we feel it's more comforting for families and those with children to have a bit more secure space. And then on the north end of the lobby there is the snack style concession. So the concession, it's intended just to serve, like I said, snacks. So we're just proposing to put a refrigerator in there as well as a sink. And then that will have a partition that opens up, or a cage style roller that opens up to the exterior as well as into the lobby on the inside. And then lastly, we just have a little housekeeping closet and then mechanical for a water tank, etc. And then the other buildings, it's fairly basic. Zamboni, we're going to include a pit for the snow to be dumped. So one of the considerations in terms of operating the site is we need to resurface it, and then we need a place for that snow. So we're going to be looking at putting a sump here that the snow could be dumped into, and then it could be heated up when necessary and then essentially dumped into the sanitary system. And then inside this building as well, we have all the ice plant infrastructure. We're proposing to put this inside of the building largely for noise considerations, also to protect the equipment, but having it close to residential surrounding homes, we do feel that it would be best served inside of the building. One other item forgot to mention, on the north side of this building, further to this being a snack style concession, we're also proposing having a natural gas hookup off of the building so that if vendors or if the town wanted to look into bringing in barbecues, that it would be easier to host larger barbecues for larger events. So these next slides are rendering images that we've had FWB architects prepared just to give council a bit better visual of what all these items actually might look like. Feel free to jump in with any questions or comments at this point. You see the buildings here. We have not finalized what exactly the fascia of these buildings or the style is exactly going to look like. We have to work with our architects and MP engineering on determining options, and then we can come back to council with a further update. This is looking through the breezeway from Main Street. Again, this is looking east towards the entrance between the two buildings. And this is what I was mentioning prior. This is the location of potential water feature. This, again, is very preliminary. This isn't necessarily exactly what this water feature would look like. If council has a desire, there's also potential for a sculpture or, like I said, a different style water feature. Essentially, at this point, I'm really just trying to hone down on the location of some sort of feature. This is looking just past the water feature in towards the ice surface. You'll see on the concrete it has this geometric design. We're looking at various options in terms of installation, likely in the form of either sandblasting or some kind of surface finish, keeping in mind that the constructability of the ice surface has to come first. So we're looking in the potential options for this, but there may be further details to figure out yet here. The last item I have here is the proposed land use of the site. So currently, the three lots on the west side of the site here are still zoned as residential. We're proposing to change this to institutional or recreational. Once this change has been made, looking at the current layout of the site as I have it proposed, we would be slightly violating the setback requirements onto 19th Street. So as you see here, we have a 25-foot setback requirement, and where I have those buildings shown currently are about 15 feet away from the road. So there's about a 10-foot violation. So that item would require approval from MPC. And then lastly, on the side yard, there's a 10-foot setback requirement. And currently we're proposing to put the future canopy columns located where we're proposing to also put the light fixtures for the space. So should council have the desire to install the canopy structure in the future, that would also slightly violate this side yard setback by about 5 feet. So just some items for council to be aware of. And with that, I don't know if Cam wants to touch us on detail, but we're looking for, I guess, direction from council to post this for a public hearing, just to speed up the process, and then we can approve the land use change without waiting to come back in another meeting. That concludes all my presentation.
So, Kalen, you have a comment on that?
Or just let you know.
Okay.
Just wouldn't it be more beneficial if we put that under direct control? That way the decision is going to be made by all of council, not MPC, on the waivers and the setbacks.
That might be more efficient.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
And then second point is, just curious what MPE engineering has to do with the project. You said it had to go back to them, and the way I understand this is an in-house project.
So our prime consultant is NPE. We're assisting with the design in-house, but in terms of producing the construction drawings, parts of the design, as well as contract administration will be through MPE, and then FWBA is their sub-consultant who is performing the, I guess, minor landscape architecture and the building architecture.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions for Dustin? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through to Dustin. Thank you so much for your report, and to all the other people that have been involved with putting this together. Really appreciate it and well detailed. several questions that I have. The first one being on that piece of property that was donated to the town on the west side of the atrium. Are you still in consultation with the donors of that property, or is that turned over completely and they're okay with the drawings, the renderings that you proposed?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Chapman. We, in good faith, we are still communicating with them. So we do want them to, I guess, be in approval of what we're proposing.
Thank you. The second question with regards to page 9 of about bathroom layout. And so one of the community members on the Access Coaldale committee was inquiring about the barrier-free access to those bathrooms. And because you're the engineer here tonight, I'm going to speak to you about it's more of a micro question. And what they wanted to find out, if there's supposed to be adult change tables in there, if they are, the question would be is if they would be able to make them sort of so that they could be lowered and raised. So if a person needs to be, put on the table for whatever reason, that it's a lot easier, and some people are heavier than others, and so it might make it just a little easier.
Okay.
So that was just a request from them. They sent me a couple of requests to bring this up, and haven't been able to get to the Access Coaldale meeting to do that yet. So I thought, well, I'll bring it here tonight and bring it to your attention, and then you can start working on those details for the future.
Yeah, it's certainly something that could be incorporated. I'm not an expert with building code, but I don't think that is a building code requirement. We're definitely looking at barrier-free for sure. But yeah, that detail is definitely something I can look into.
The third question is with regards to the ice rink. And having worked in an arena before, Zambonis do not like square settings, from my experience, and so you're proposing that the ice surface have square corners. How is that going to facilitate Zamboni for service?
There would be some hand finishing essentially at the corners that would be required. I don't know if Russ, if you want
Yeah, you can, it's not as ideal, obviously, time-wise, but you can back up in the corner and put a conditioner down and still condition it there. It's just the edge would have a little bit more work than required.
Russ, can I just get you to come up on the microphone here, please? Just start that all over again.
So, Councillor Chapman, to answer your question, there will be a little bit more work done, like Dustin mentioned, by hand, by edging and things. However, we can get into the corners. And, when you see a regular routine of a Zamboni on a hockey rink ice going around the corners, this will take us backing up into the corner.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess first question, I don't know if it would be directed to you or more towards Caitlin. The bathroom trailer that we had rented for Summerfest, do you ballpark know what one of those would be worth? A rental, B to purchase?
I'm not aware off the top of my head.
The reason I'm asking is, so this one, based on the staff report, this bathroom design is about a $500,000 touch, right?
We don't have the final building costs wrapped up right now.
Okay.
Based off the original estimates that I provided, we have had some savings in terms of hardscaping.
Right.
So there are, I guess, considerations with the two buildings. There's now an additional mechanical room. There's one less shared wall. So there are some cost implications.
Mm-hmm.
The exact cost, I guess, was kind of dwarfed together before. So I don't have today the exact cost of each building, and largely that will depend on what kind of facade we go with, the exterior and shape of it as well.
Okay. And that's a big part of kind of on my decision there. Using an alternative method like the trailer, for instance, because if we don't have a single park in Coaldale that has a bathroom, let alone a 6-stall bathroom and a concession, everything else. I look at Olympic Plaza in Calgary, doesn't offer any of this. They have a public washroom setting that's part of the city of Calgary's public washroom layout that they have throughout downtown Calgary. It's not an Olympic Plaza thing for the use there. That's just the site that they had chosen. I'm just looking at what a potentially more feasible option might be for a bathroom layout, considering the budget season we just came through. Because there seems to be quite a push to go forward on this, and just wondering if there's anything that we can do to kind of buy time before we go to something that's extravagant.
That's, I guess, certainly an option council could look into. I would, I guess, recommend if we're going to build a bathroom, I would do it at the same time as the rest of the site. There are definitely efficiencies there. Yeah, I guess going back to budget discussions, proceeding on the direction of the budget item that was approved. This is the concept we've come up with, so if council wants to allocate that budget elsewhere, that's definitely something you could do.
And a comment I have on that as well is this is something that we as a council already approved for them to do the bathrooms. And further to that, this plaza will be used 365 days of the year, hopefully.
Yep.
So then we would need washroom facilities. And this plaza will be open off hours from the Civic Center or Civic Square itself. So the doors will be locked at times for the Civic Square,
Right.
whereas the plaza will be open, so we need people to be able to access bathrooms. Any other questions? Okay, Dustin, I got a couple. Can you call up that other 3D rendering that shows a bit of, yes, that one. So where the residential house is to the south, and you got that fence there? Something just to throw out there, maybe we should do something decorative like they have at Cottonwood, that concrete fence to act as a sound barrier for the residents versus just wood fence one. And then the EV rough-in for the electric vehicle charging stations, when you say you're gonna rough in, you're gonna have that set up so the pad mount just has to go in place, or are we gonna have to dig all that up to put that in at some point?
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. In terms of the EV, we're likely looking at having a central distribution panel off of the transformer, and then from there, we would have conduit roughed in to the location of future proposed parking stalls. So
They just have to upsize. They just have to upsize the existing transformer.
Yeah, that transformer, part of the Civic Square building development, we made sure that that transformer was adequately sized for the outdoor space as well as the EV chargers.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of pulling the wires essentially to the new charging locations.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is the existing back alley. I understand we're going to put all the services underground. So when you say partially closed, like for the businesses that are back there, we still have to give them access, like for that phase 2 building that's going in?
So currently we're looking at maintaining access to ATV and the real estate center where they already have a parking lot back there. The phase 2 development, we're not looking at currently providing any access. That was going to be it's to be determined still, but the intent was there would be a green space that would kind of tie into the outdoor space. So I guess some of the questions that might come up in terms of garbage access, we're looking at oversizing our garbage access so that there is room for that development as well. And then the parking lot will have extra parking based on the current size for that as well. Again, it's largely dependent on what sort of development goes there in terms of what those requirements are, but we aren't considering vehicle access past the real estate center at this time.
With that being said, then the archway off of 18th Street, then that'll double to prevent vehicles from going down there.
That's correct, and that's kind of the intent. So aesthetics is one function, and then the second function being to deter vehicles as well.
Okay, and then my only comment, last comment I should say, is the concession stand on the drawing that you have, that shows like only like a 4-foot opening, if that. Just want to make sure that opening is like at least a 6-footer, because if you have events there's people that are going to be, it's going to be like a little choke point with a little small opening, so make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, for sure. We can definitely incorporate that. Again, these are very preliminary,
Yes.
so yeah, it's a detail I'll keep in mind.
Okay, and then Deputy Mayor Pickering had a question.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to Dustin. So in that future commercial property there, so is that not Shift doing that? Or is that who's going to do it after? Because I was just curious, like Jack brought parking up. If somebody owns them businesses, where is their staff going to park? Plus, they have to provide parking for people, right?
Yeah, so Caitlin, I don't know if you want to comment in terms of.
Right in that green strip. If that's behind there, ATB has parking for basically for some of their employees. So does the realtor place. If you open a business there and you have your own staff, where are they supposed to park?
There is additional parking in this parking lot
For that.
this development. And as I said, I mean, this too, like based off of what we think it likely will be under land use bylaw requirements, there are stipulations for the downtown area on what parking requirements are that are different than other areas in town. But other things that we can look at if it does become an issue is cash in lieu for future parking, which is something that we could look at in other areas of the downtown at a later date. And again, with further developments in the area, it's going to compound as an issue through downtown to meet current land use bylaw requirements. So we're likely looking not by this phase 2 development, but by other developments, additional parking past this as places redevelop and more parking is required essentially.
We also have extra parking lot that the town owns north of this building, so that'll be available as well.
Yeah. Plus, we're also adding these angled parking stalls on 19th Street. This is currently parallel parking, so we're adding about, I think it's 6 stalls there as well. Plus, there's angled parking all the way down 18th Street on both sides.
Okay, thank you.
And Kaylin, did you have a comment on that?
I was just going to add that we have been in discussions with Shift, the developer for phase 2, and have been working with them, brainstorming master planning for how phase 2 can look. So we've been keeping them in the fold as part of the planning process.
Okay. Councillor Reese?
Thanks, Mayor Van Rijn, to Dustin. So with regards to the water feature or statue or with the sculpture, when are you going to be bringing that back to council?
I think for the question, Councillor Reese, I don't have a date in mind right now, but as we progress with the design, I'll have to be conscious of timelines for once we post this to APC for construction. So it'll likely be, if not the next council meeting, potentially the one after. So if council could put some thought into that, if there's something that they would like to see, or appreciate the feedback on that, as well as the pedestrian entrance feature.
Okay, so will you be having some designs to show us to look at that next meeting then, or different water features for different statues, sculptures?
Future meeting, not the next.
Future? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I definitely can bring some options. If there's any direction whatsoever, yeah.
Kaylin, you had another comment?
I was just going to add, in the event that we need a bit more time, one way to save time and keep the rest of the project going is to provide the requisite rough-ins for a water feature. That way council's not rushed in having to decide what kind of feature. The other thing council may appreciate is just seeing what the cost of the overall project is, so you know how much money you have available for a feature, because the price range for features is significant. You can go quite like a modest bubbling rock to something that's a bit more extravagant.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
having, like, knowing what the tender results are for the core project might help council determine what kind of a
Yeah,
feature.
that's why I was just kind of curious, like, when we're gonna see that kind of stuff. So thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'll direct this question through to Kaylin, if I may, and more of an extracurricular question on parking. Now that it has come up for conversation, is there a possibility that we could brand or market or make these parking spots like this one here and the one behind this building sort of advertise it or promote it as overflow parking for the downtown? I know that already downtown is really, really busy, and just to get people into that habitual mode of parking in other locations that for longer term this might be available to them.
Yeah, through to Councillor Chapman, that's certainly something we can look at. I will say that with respect to the parking lot behind us here, that is a lease agreement. It's a 1-year lease, year to year, so it's a little bit difficult to tailor a marketing strategy to alert people to where they can park when we don't renew the parking agreement past 12 months. But I do appreciate how congested downtown gets, especially when we have large scale events. And so some type of plan to let people know where they can park for events like that would be helpful.
Fair enough, thank you.
And thanks for the clarification, because I think I mentioned we own that one. We actually lease that one.
We own a sliver.
Yes, a sliver, yes.
It's like a down payment.
So last question then before we close this off. As far as public input to any of these design options, like we did a lot of this through an online survey, is there going to be any more public input available for this? Or is this, we're going to design it and build it based on what we're talking about over the next month or so?
Yeah, through to Mayor Van Rijn. Based on the feedback we've gotten and the amount of engagement we had through our survey, we had it open for almost 5 months, and we had 105 responses, and we feel like we've had a, I guess, accurate representation of the responses incorporated into the design. So we're pretty comfortable based off what we feel the community wants. But again, if the council has a certain aspect of the project that they feel they want feedback on, it is something that we could do.
Okay, thank you. Maybe when the time comes, further to Councillor Reese's comments about the water feature and such as the statue, whatever we decide to do, we can maybe invite public to have input on that as well. Okay, well, thank you. That's a very impressive project that you presented this evening. So our options for this is first option choice is that council directs administration to proceed with the proposed conceptual design of the Civic Square outdoor space project based on the proposed conceptual layout attached to this report. Option 2 is that council directs administration to change specific components of the proposed design and or explore further options. Does anyone care to sponsor one of those 2 options?
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering about the direct control. Where would that?
That will come at a later date. This is just for the update here. We just need a motion for that. So, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just thinking on this for right now. I would support option number 1 that we received for information. I believe that there's probably some more details that are going to be required before we can actually start making some more concrete decisions.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah.
So the approval that we're going to be giving Dustin this evening is to proceed with the project as the budget was outlined that we passed on. And then for some of the finer details, like we said, the water feature or whatever we want to do, some of those smaller items, we can come back and have a discussion about that, correct?
So I will make the motion that we can receive this report for information and that council direct administration to proceed with the proposed conceptual design of the Civic Square outdoor space project based on the proposed conceptual layout attached in this report.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Avery, Councillor Beekman opposed. The motion is passed. Thank you, Dustin. Okay, moving on. Sorry for our presenters to make them wait a little bit longer, but I wanted to get this finished. So we're going to have the Gem of the West Museum Society present. We have Lynden Hutchinson, the president, and Craig Day, the manager. If you want to please take a seat up at the table. And when you're ready, the floor is yours. Land has got a PowerPoint up ready. That should move the slides for you.
Well, first
Can
of
they do it
all,
themselves, Land?
I appreciate the opportunity to come and make a presentation to council. We've been here before, but it's just kind of an update. So I think what we'll do is Craig has put together some collection of slides to show what he has been doing and some of what we propose to do in the future to indicate what the value of the museum to the town.
Okay. So yeah, the museum's mission has always kind of been concreted in for since the foundation. So our mission statement has always reflected a community-driven belief that was founded back in 1995 with the creation of the society. And we've had generations of dedicated volunteers that has made the museum what it is today as kind of caretakers for Coaldale's past. So our current board members have contributed lots of their time and skills to multiple projects around the museum. These projects have included de-accessioning items, cleaning, exhibit setups, even removal of fences and decorating. And I see here some of our volunteers where we've decorated the museum up for Christmas and kind of seasonal events, which are enjoyed by visitors who come to the museum and those who also rent the facility. And then kind of go on to why it's important to kind of have someone in-house there. So having a person in the building, being able to dispense information for visitors or those visiting the museum, even beyond the scope of the museum itself, is very beneficial. And one of our big long-term projects I know I've talked about here in the past is, which we started a few years ago, is accessioning all the artifacts in our collection. And our hope is when this is done, it will be a valuable online research tool for residents of Coaldale's when it's completed, that they will have access to it online as well, with a complete database of what we have for artifacts. And we also have a growing collection of archival material, photos, newspaper, documents, and that's kind of another phase of getting that all digitized and available to the public, whether it's coming in to see us or eventually, hopefully, online like other museums do. So, and that's kind of the roles that I do, the many different associated with the museum, from curator to exhibit designer, archivist, collections, educator, attendant, social media, marketing. So it requires a balancing for all these diverse skills, and kind of showcases the importance of having someone trained in that position. So the knowledge set kind of, when it comes to collection management, we really have to focus on minimizing negative impacts on the artifacts. So that means proper handling, displaying, storing, and that comes with training and proper schooling. Some of our accessioning projects that have gone on the past couple of years since I've stepped in. We also
have to understand that different artifacts require different and specific labeling methods and storage methods. And we also use a specific software designed for museums, which is called Past Perfect. And it is constructed specifically for museum institutions to create a detailed inventory of museum collections and artifacts. And it can be a slow process inputting all those records into the system. So, but we also managed to do some cost-saving methods. So in the past, we did do an original video of the Suggett family, which is on display in our cafe exhibit. When we sourced that out to get that one done, which came at a cost of $4,000, which was usually acquired, or which was acquired through grants and that, with some cost to the museum. However, since we've been able to move to a more affordable in-house video production option, so in the last 2 years, we've been able to create a video about the museum building history, and then with our rejuvenated Indigenous exhibit, bison hunting and Indigenous weapons. And we are actually currently working on a Japanese history video as well. We've done a few short YouTube videos, and altogether, by doing these in-house, we've kind of kept the cost around the $500 mark for all those videos. So I don't know if I'm able to play that little video clip. It's about 5 or 10 seconds. So I'm not sure if I can. It's not showing up, so that's all right. Also in-house, we do a lot of our own exhibit fabrication. So here you can see last year in the spring, we kind of went through the stages of fabricating our archaeology display in the rejuvenated Indigenous exhibit, and that was all done in-house to keep expenses low and really maximize what we can do and stretch our dollars. So when it comes to our artifacts in our collection, again, this is a lot of training required, a lot of forethought when it comes to accepting items into our collection. We have to take into account a lot of factors, like where the object can be displayed, what story it actually tells, how it connects to Coaldale, and if we can adequately care for the object itself as far as storing it in the environment. So we can kind of see here, one of our recent acquisitions was a collection of salt and pepper shakers from a local, at the time, a local donor, and yeah, it requires very significant care in displaying the story we tell for that. Also, my terrible picture of me on my first day. But there's a large amount of administrative duties that come along with the job, and that's the maintaining the social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and our website maintenance. But last year, we offered school tours again, and we had over 100 kids visiting from 3 different schools. So we are making a public presence. And beyond that, we also do, because of our presence in the building, we do look after a lot of the visitors that come in for the information, the tourist kind of side of Coaldale. And beyond me, in the summer, we hire a summer student through the use of grants again, and it allows us to be open 6 days a week to assist visitors that come to the town. I'll just go, so there is many records and reports online and everywhere of articles showing the importance that museums do have to the community. And that's what the Gem of the West Museum strives to do, is fulfill that kind of cultural and educational role in Coaldale. So It's kind of holding that collective memory of rural communities. But where we stand out a bit is from other museums is we actually also have an additional cultural presence in the community with our Scotiabank Art Gallery. So in our Art and Culture Committee has worked towards many different aspects in there for the different exhibits that we put on. We're currently working to set up a circus-themed exhibit in May with some recently acquired wood carvings that kind of came into our collection from a local artist, and also reach out to schools to see about kind of expanding on that a bit. So what we kind of do already, which has kind of been stated, is we host fundraisers throughout the year and some events as well, and we receive constant positive feedback about how our events go from the guests and visitors. But what we'd like to do is kind of expand on that, and our goal is to develop more of various year-round activities, such as one we've just completed actually today, a 6-week program with the library to do story time at the museum, where Morgan has come in and read a story in a specific area of one of our exhibits. We also would like to do some historic talks where we have lots of resources available to us in the area with presenters. There's also potential for Indigenous kind of themed stuff. Again, lots of resources available to us to host those kind of events. And we have a functioning blacksmith shop which worked last summer for the school tours, which we would definitely have that resource utilized for us for really hosting a variety of educational kind of talks and events. So, and then like already previously mentioned a little bit, the museum has always hired a summer student for the summer. It kind of allows these students to get real world experience in the cultural sector. It also teaches them that small towns offer the same opportunities that these bigger centers can as well in that cultural sector. We are doing it again this summer, just again waiting on grant approval for before we get the hiring process going. And another area we're exploring as well is potentially expanding on this concept with collaboration with the University of Lethbridge to offer our museum facility in conjunction with their internship programs that they offer. So we also have participated in a lot of the community events, and we hope to continue to grow on that. I know in the upcoming Family Day at the community center, we're going to have a table set up with some museum related artifacts and themed information. So, but yeah, we kind of like to participate as much as we can in the community, and we're hoping to continue to grow on that. So with that being said, I will pass it on to Lynden when it comes to the budget and finances aspect. So,
And Lynden, just before you start, like, this was all circulated with members of council before tonight's meeting, so you don't have to go into too much detail of the budget.
No, thanks, Jack. No, it always comes down to money eventually. And if you looked at that budget, you can see how if extraordinary events occur like COVID or some of your donors, aren't donors anymore, or your fundraisers are flopped, then we are in a position where essentially, if you look on the budget for this year, the amount for salaries alone, which is of course is our biggest amount, is around $60,000, and the town very generously gives us $30,500. So that's about half of what we project. And of course, salaries do rise. So amongst ourselves, we were thinking, this makes us a bit nervous to offer a full-time job, which I think Craig just showed you that the secret to a good museum is a trained full-time person there that can make the museum better and available in both an educational and cultural way. So essentially what we're saying is that to have a good museum, you need a full-time manager. To have a full-time manager, you have to be able to assure him or her that their salary is sound and on into the future. So we thought we would just present this to council and have them think about it. We're afraid sometimes if our fundraisers don't flop or something, we may we're all right in the current position, but we're looking into the future. We consider topping up that 30,000 somewhat so that we can feel comfortable in hiring the people like Craig. In addition to that, we're going to approach the County of Lethbridge and make the same kind of presentation to them and try to convince them that they may have some responsibility in helping the museum flourish, because it definitely has a lot to do with the rural areas as well as the town. That's basically what we want to do. We want to just make council aware of what we're doing and what we intend to improve the museum in the future, and we can always use a little more money. I know the budgets are tight, and I've sat in those chairs before, so I know. So thank you very much. Unless there are questions.
I'll ask the first question, Lynden. So regard back to Lethbridge County, currently you get no funding from them whatsoever. Have you ever applied for their land trust grant? I think that's the correct name for that one.
They have an annual fund that we're currently looking at. We haven't applied, to my knowledge, in the past for anything in that regard, but we have made steps in seeing if we can get an annual funding from them.
And then the Town of Coaldale granting program that we offer, that comes from the photo radar program. You're a society, so you should be able to apply. I'm not sure if you've applied in the past for funds from that grant.
Yes, we have, and we received it. We some of us put money into the fund. We're aware of that. So and whenever we can, we'll try to fit the parameters of that grant.
Okay. So I guess at the end of the day, what you're hoping here is that council would consider increasing your $30,500 budget amount.
We're just a little apprehensive that that's something that we can't guarantee. And currently it's Craig, and I hope he's there for a long time because he's really good at what he does. But to make sure that he can afford to stay here by getting his salary in the range it should be, and so that's what worries us. So
okay, so obviously you know that we've set our budget for 2023 already, so this is something we would take into consideration when we start our budget deliberations this fall.
Yeah, we're aware of that. So
okay, any questions for either Craig or Lynden?
I do have several there, Mayor, if I may. And thank you so much to both of you, and please give my best greetings to the board where I sat for 8 years or so. My first question is with regards to a comment you made here about having an on-site person to handle visitors' questions, or whether they be museum or rental related. Do you get questions that from visitors that are just asking about general events in town, sort of like general visitor questions rather than museum related?
In the summertime, yes, I'll have visitors come in. They're looking. I've had questions about campground in town, where to eat in town. I've had people come in as far as the building rental facility, just inquiring about tables, chairs, layout, setups, things like that as far as the rental aspect. And more than happy to facilitate those questions because I'm there and that's the facility they're questioning. So, but yeah, I get a range of different questions throughout the year. So.
Final, my next question is with regards to some of the repairs and renovations and work that's done in the building itself. Maybe it might be something Russ might be able to help us with, but how are those renovations and repairs? I know that Clayton Bardessy was in to do some sound and lighting and that sort of thing. Like, is that ongoing?
Yeah, I'm not sure the status on Clayton's audiovisual project. I know he's been in a lot, and he's worked out a lot of the wiring, we'll call them kinks in the system to make sure it's a very consistent setup. And I know he wants to make some improvements on it as well, but I'm not privy to those kind of details. So.
Final question is with regards to your operations, are there any infrastructure needs that you guys, that your board's looking at that need to be updated and upgraded at the museum that will require some additional funding from the town to do?
I know like the town stays on top of a lot of the renovation issues. I know in the past 2 years there was the foundation work, which was a big project. I'm not sure. I know those shingles are monitored to know when their life expectancy needs to be done, and that there's a staggered process of doing some of the windows that have been unfortunately the original wooden windows, which would have been damaged by birds, basically. So, and I think we've currently done 6 window replacements now since last December, or since 2021 December. So.
And just one more question. You're obviously seeking sponsorships as well. Is that ongoing as well?
We fundraising is always ongoing for whether it be exhibit projects or if we can find kind of what we're said here, like funding that really stabilizes us, that is a consistent and doesn't fluctuate as much. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, can I get someone to sponsor a motion that we receive the Gem of the West delegation presentation as information? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 5.2, our next delegation. We have guided journeys, hospice and palliative care. If you ladies would like to take a seat, Tom, if you could put another chair up there for me, please.
I'll slide one up there.
Okay, Tom, we got it.
So first off, Honorable Mayor and Councilors, thank you very much for having us
If
here.
I just get you, the three of you to introduce yourselves, please.
Yes, that was my next.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, my name is Celeste Ment, and I've been a palliative care nurse for the last 16 years. This is Kinga Zentner. She's the president of our Guided Journeys Foundation, a newly formed foundation, approximately a year in progress. And Lenore Beyer, she's one of the directors, and she's also very familiar with medical supply, is what she worked in for years. So I'm just gonna present some information here. So Guided Journeys was an organization founded a year ago. Our goal is to educate communities about palliative care and to get conversation around death and dying with dignity initiated. The ability to give everyone the opportunity to live their best life until they die is imperative. So palliative care is a specialized form of healthcare that helps those with a progressive life-limiting illness to live their lives the best way possible. It optimizes quality of life, alleviates pain, and reduces symptoms. The goal is to provide comfort and dignity for the person living with the illness, but also for their families. Although palliative care is usually associated with people who are actively dying, it's also for people with serious progressive illness, such as lung disease, heart disease. Examples of that are congestive heart failure and congestive obstructive disease, kidney disease, Lou Gehrig's or ALS, neurological diseases such as dementia, and AIDS and HIV. People may have months or years left to live and can benefit from palliative care by having their symptoms and concerns looked after during all phases of their illness. It can assist people as they plan for treatment or where they want to be cared for if they can't be at home. So, a hospice facility offers supportive care for people at the end of life, as well as for their families. End of life or comfort care is palliative care without a curative measure. So a lot of times you hear people talk about palliative care, which their concept of that is people are at the end of life. But when they're actually at the end of life, it's considered comfort care. So it is a form of palliative care. So care focuses on the physical symptoms, such as pain, nausea, shortness of breath, loss of appetite, and confusion. It deals with the emotional and spiritual needs of patients and families. It ensures care is respectful and supportive of patient dignity. And it respects social and cultural needs of patients and families. So on that aspect, that's another important point of having a hospice. Just in our area here, we look, there's probably about 12 different spiritual beliefs and different rituals around dying. So a hospice can accommodate that. And it's something as basic as being able to face the head of a bed to the east, allowing smudging ceremonies, allowing drumming ceremonies. There's different spiritual beliefs for every culture. The other thing with that is just in this area here, there's about 12 different languages that are spoken. So to have those amenities available in one place where you have an interpreter, where you have somebody that can respect the cultural and social needs of various members is really important. So the team is made up of interdisciplinary end-of-life caregivers. So there's palliative physicians, there's nursing staff, social workers, pharmacists, and clergy. A hospice provides a person-centered model for healthcare, one that provides patients and their loved ones with comfort, peace, and dignity during life's most intimate and vulnerable experiences. So Guided Journeys Hospice will provide a tranquil, caring space for people from all walks of life to spend their final days in the most dignified and loving manner. So we have to begin to recognize that death is not just a medical issue, it's a community issue. A life-limiting illness impacts every aspect of a community. It impacts family, friends, schools, housing, faith communities, businesses, and beyond. So death as a social event has historically been community supported. If you look back at the Aboriginal beliefs, there was all the relatives supported somebody through that dying journey. So a hospice can also offer that benefit, that it supports generational healing to take place and provides a very comforting end of life where people can actually live the best quality of life up until the end of life. So part of our mission is to educate people in preparation for the next phase of life. So we look at our population right now, our aging population. The seniors lodges are full. At this point in time right now, just in the community, like with our palliative rural physicians in Lethbridge, there's 260 people that are in palliative care right now. So where are those people gonna pass away? How are they gonna get that support? Like, we just don't have the facilities to provide the type of care that everybody at the end of life needs. So that was our goal when we set out to build a hospice to serve Southern Alberta, so that we can provide all those amenities for our families that are here. So basically that's what we wanted to do, was pass on that information, just to let you know what is in the works. We have found a piece of property that would be more than ideal to build on. But of course, because we're a new foundation, we certainly don't have the finances to invest in that land right now. But that's our goal, and we're currently working with that now. So, yeah. So that's all I have to say. So I hope you have some questions.
Well, thank you for your presentation. So the question for council then, is there an ask coming from you for the town of Coaldale, or are you just here to provide information?
At this point, we just wanted to provide information. We want people to pass that information on, to let them know that this is in the process. And I think you got some renderings of the building, did you not?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have had an architect that has stepped forward to give us renderings of what the building would look like. And it definitely fulfills all the needs of what we're looking for.
It's a beautiful facility.
It's going to be. It is so needed.
Yes. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to the committee, is it gonna like be in close to the town of Coaldale, or is it gonna be in the county? Or
Our goal right now is to keep it on the fringe of Lethbridge, just so that there is access to hotels and restaurants. Plus, we had to keep in mind that our palliative team in Lethbridge has to come to the facility every day. There would be a pharmacist involved, so whether that would be a Coaldale pharmacist or a Lethbridge pharmacist in there. So we just tried to keep it, because the south zone right now goes to the Saskatchewan border, up to Brooks, to the BC border, and down as far as Princeton. So we have a very large population. So we were trying to keep it more central to accommodate our health doctors in Lethbridge, and also to be able to support like Blairmore, and yeah, so we didn't want to get too far east. Medicine Hat does have an 8-bed unit, so our services would probably be as far east as Bow Island or Depth.
Thank you. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, ladies, for the presentation. Maybe I missed it somewhere here, so I'll just ask, how many beds would you be hoping for in this facility?
10.
10? Okay. And how many staff full-time staff would you be planning on?
So our staffing would mostly be, we'd have to have a registered nurse there 24 hours a day, so that's 3 shifts. A lot of how the hospice would be run is based on volunteers. So the actual paid staff would be our medical staff.
So in terms of spiritual leaders, for instance, those would all just be on-call volunteers?
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, and that's basically how we're supported right now. With St. Mike's has 10 beds, but it's still within the facility. It still seems like a hospital, where this would provide all the amenities for families, like to have the chapel in there, to have counseling offices, to have a social worker, so you have everything that you need in one place. Like I say, a lot of it is to respect culturally diverse people, that they don't have the opportunity to fulfill those needs in a hospital or in a lodge, or St. Mike's also is limited on what they can allow there. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, having looked through the renderings, like the facility looks incredible. So thank you.
Yeah, and that with the rendering, because I've been in the profession for 16 years and have had people pass away in palliative care, part of my family members, I was pretty aware of what our family needed, what would have supported our family. So we just kind of tried to set it up as efficiently for the staff, for the doctors, for families, as we possibly could. So.
Thank you. Lenore, you had something to say?
Councillor Beekman. St. Michael's was also closed for a period of time in palliative care. And so, excuse me, and I have been with 4 different people that have passed in palliative care, so I'm very aware of what it takes. And part of, with St. Michael's, it was very clinical, but it was very upsetting to me that though there was a shortage of nursing, they chose to close palliative care, and they were putting people wherever they could shuffle a bed. I mean, it was just something beyond belief. I have been, and I'm not going to step on Celeste, but I've had the opportunity to go to Okotoks to see the facility that was there. And it's on the outskirts of Okotoks in a rural setting, and it kind of looks down upon the city that's there. And to have been able to walk through and to watch the interaction, in particular with the volunteers, because that will be my step as director. As this is moving on, then I will become a volunteer, because it's so very important. Even if someone's not able to speak or they're in their last 72 hours, it's just really important that somebody's there in the room, even if you're reading, rubbing their feet a little bit, just so that they know. And we certainly have the volunteers. We have been very fortunate with Celeste, having been very dedicated as a palliative care nurse. And so we have embraced that, and meetings such as this one or other parts of Southern Alberta is where we've been going, and it's more of an information. I mean, even today, I work part-time. 3 people came in today and said, are you still involved with that palliative care? And I said, yes, I am. And it was really interesting, because people know that what we're trying to do now is to try and find the land. They said, get the land and the money will come. And I believe that sincerely. And I'm very hopeful that it will be between Lethbridge and Coaldale. There is a piece of land that we are looking at. We've also embraced with Celeste, just so that, because it will be something that we'll be approaching Coaldale for. Mayor Van Rijn, we'll be in Pitcher Butte March 18th, and it's more of an informative evening. People will be buying tickets kind of at a minimal amount, because there will be a light dinner that will be there. Celeste and Kinga will be speaking. But we will talk about the memorial stones that people are able to purchase, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to finish the night off with a dessert auction to so people in Pitcher Butte, that I'm hoping that we will have something at the Coaldale Community Center again, because people want to come and they want to listen, because they don't understand. And I also brought one of these just for you to be able, I'll leave it behind, and explains a little bit more about palliative care.
Well, thank you.
And our need for it.
Thank you, Lenore. Councillor Chapman, you have a closing comment question?
I do. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much to the 3 of you and your vision for end of life. I wrote the word down, closure, and mainly because that's so important to everybody. And I know that, just an example, of my next door neighbor passed away a year ago, and for my wife and I, we haven't gotten closure. So this is a good opportunity to offer that faith-based. I believe in that 100% and appreciate your vision for that. And I think some of the examples with new Canadians that arrive here that still bring their culture and their traditions, and I think that's important that we're able to give closure for those families as well. So I appreciate your vision, and Lenore, you've been a stronghold here in the community. Appreciate all your hard work.
Okay, well, thank you very much, ladies. Appreciate your coming out, and make sure you keep us informed, and if there's anything we can help you with, send us an email and we'll get together again.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much for having us here.
You're very welcome. Can I get someone to sponsor a motion that council receive the guided journeys delegation as information? Deputy Mayor Pickering, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cameron, I'm just going to move the agenda around one more time here. Archie has another meeting to go to, so I'm going to jump ahead to the under new business agenda item 8.3, Alberta Advantage Immigration Program Participation. And we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. And Archie, I'm going to get you just to introduce yourself too, please.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Archie Bofu. I am the General Manager for Whole Leaf. Whole Leaf is the latest greenhouse down the road.
Thank you. Go ahead, Cameron.
Thank you very much, Mayor Van Rijn, Council. Pleased to be here this evening to talk about the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. And what we're talking about here is a program that's sort of jointly administered by both levels of the provincial and federal government. Formerly, this was known as the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program, and it's an economic immigration program that nominates people for permanent residency in Alberta, so through the Canadian immigration system, and then providing them with permanent residency. Nominees for this program have to have skills to fill job shortages or be planning to buy or start a business in Alberta, and they must be able to provide for their families. The program is run by the governments of Alberta and Canada. And what the program fundamentally entails is that the province selects through what is known as the rural renewal stream a number of communities. I believe they're looking for up to 20 that will be fundamentally sponsors for the program. And then the municipality sets up a portal whereby applicants for the program, in terms of immigrant applications for the program, are streamed. So we can post positions for our business community within the program. Applicants from around the world can look at those, they can apply. The municipality then vets those potential applicants, make sure they meet a number of criteria that exist within the program itself, and then once that applicant is vetted as being appropriate, then they can be approved and then sponsored. A business is an opportunity to sponsor them and provide them an opportunity to immigrate to Canada, I believe for a period of 2 years. So once they come in, they're fundamentally tied to that position for a period and that community for a period of 2 years, at which point they have the ability to seek other opportunities in the province. So won't go through the nuts and bolts of the report completely. However, when we look at the program, this is really the municipal participation in a federal government level program as well as the province. And Southgrow briefly mentioned it as part of their presentation a couple months ago back to council. We have received sort of high-level requests from a number of businesses in Coaldale and the region about potentially being included in the program. From my perspective, being one of the communities that's a part of this program has a number of benefits. First and foremost, it provides an opportunity for some of our businesses to provide for an expansion of the labor force. And as we all know, and we've heard the stories from business owners, that it can be difficult to hire for certain positions and in certain instances, and provides for another opportunity there. As far as the town's participation, it provides for us, looking through my position and the work that I do, provides for us another tool in our toolkit, so to speak, in terms of marketing the community. When we talk about our industrial expansion, that we're talking about potential investors coming into the community, being able to tell them that this is an option for them if they're looking at setting up a manufacturing operation in town, or they're looking to open a restaurant in town, for example. The fact that we could potentially be a community that offers those services means that the chance of them investing in the community goes up. To what extent it would depend on the particular investor, but it is one thing that would further enhance our ability to attract that investment. There are fundamentally two ways that the town can go about doing this. So the town can seek the opportunity to engage in this program independently, or we have an opportunity to partner with the town of Taber. What we're proposing here and our recommendation is that we seek that opportunity to partner with the town of Taber. There are a number of reasons for that. First and foremost, the application deadline for getting into the program is February 15th, which is in fact in 2 days from now. So the ability to get in, Taber is already approved and in fact has been running the program for I believe a little bit under a year. And they are already approved, they've already got everything in a row. The other advantage is a significant cost reduction. So for example, talking to them, this program alone generates typically 20 to 25 phone calls a day for their staff, in addition to numerous visits on a daily basis for their staff and meetings. It is a substantial amount of work to vet potential applicants. The town of Taber's our economic development staff is a portion of my time. Town of Taber has a director at my level with whom a portion of their time is spent on this, though their focus is a little narrower. They also have a full-time economic development officer, and in addition to that, have hired someone full-time just to administer this program. So I would suggest that us engaging on our own is likely something that we're going to be looking, if we choose to do so, to be part of 2024 budget deliberations that would probably need to see us budget substantially to fill a position in order to make that possible. Taber has offered with joining with them, so they currently have a program where they run it for the town, and they're also doing this for the for Vauxhall. One of their business owners also operates a business in Vauxhall, and so they've included the two together, and they've offered at this time to pilot the project. It sounds like at no cost for us, at least for the first year. That, in my opinion, will give us an opportunity to see what uptake it looks like for the town. And if after a year we find that there's substantial uptake and Taber says, this is substantial work for us, we need to talk about some cost sharing, then we'll have a sense of what that might look like. Still likely to be substantially cheaper moving forward than going about it on our own. But again, I want to stress at this time we're not talking about needing any financial contribution from council to participate. If we do select the option of partnering with Taber, I simply need a letter mentioning this council resolution to be forwarded to Taber, and they let the appropriate folks at the Alberta and Canadian governments know, and then we go from there.
Archie, so can you explain to council your perspective on how this would help your company?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Holyf employs about 130 people, and our turnover rates can go up to about 50% every 6 months, because we employ people at general labor level. We pay our starting wages $16. We feel that is competitive because places like ours pay similar rates. But we've struggled with employees, and talking to other business owners here in Coaldale, they struggle the same as well. Most recently, we had a talk with ITB in a conference that we were attending, and they were sharing the same. They're losing people because people don't want to commute. Most people that work for us commute from Lethbridge. Would like to get to a point where we have people that live in Coaldale that are close to where we are. So that's a good savings for them in gas money going back and forth to work. But it's also a good and stable workforce for us in that regard. So we were excited to learn about this program and wanted to come in and lobby and see if council could support it, because there's value for both sides, business and the town. And hopefully this is something that the town can go forward with and put an application through and be able to help the businesses around. Because if we could move the greenhouse, in all honesty, it's a good business decision to move it to a place where there's the labor. So we are here, we are not wanting to move, we want to be here in Coaldale for the next foreseeable future. So we would like that support.
Thank you. And then because your business is in Lethbridge County, Cameron, how does Lethbridge County go into this mix?
So as of right now, my understanding of the program is that they draw the lines fairly tightly. However, we'd be happy to start finding ways to include whole leaf within the Coaldale consideration. And I think it makes enough sense that logically we can probably get there, though flexibility with the federal government is always challenging. But that'd be something we'd be happy to do. As far as Lethbridge County engaging in this type of process, that's something they need their own council to push moving forward. I'd suggest that our inclusion would probably provide Lethbridge County with a model for doing the same at the very least, but I would be happy to work on the whole leaf's behalf to see if we can find a way to include them as part of the Coaldale region once we're in.
Well, both the provincial and federal governments are all about regionalization, so here's an opportunity if we can get Lethbridge County on board with this as well, and maybe I can reach out to the Reeve and plant a seed. And
yes, the difficulty will be the timeline.
Yes.
Given that they need a council resolution, right?
But a letter of support could help.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up to council. Any questions for Cameron or Archie? Okay, well, thank you very much, Archie, for coming out, and we look forward to hopefully this moving forward.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we have two resolution options here. Option number one is to resolve to support Coaldale's inclusion in the Tabor region of the rural renewal stream of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, and direct administration to provide a letter of support authorizing the town's inclusion in the Tabor region. Or option two is to not support Coaldale's inclusion. So I'll open that up for discussion, and ultimately someone can make one of those two motion options, please. Councillor Beekman.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for option one to resolve to support Coaldale's inclusion in the Tabor region of the rural renewal stream of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, and direct administration to provide a letter of support authorizing the town's inclusion in the Tabor region.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to back up to agenda item 7.1, the Industrial Incentive Policy C024. And again, we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Okay, very good. So presenting here for Council's consideration is a new policy, or I should say an updated industrial incentive policy. The framework of which has been discussed at a high level. It's something that we've been discussing since we started looking at the expansion of the industrial park here in Coaldale. And fundamentally, it comes down to a broader conversation that we've had about investment attraction for commercial and industrial developments, noting that the industrial park, the existing industrial park originally developed by the town, is fundamentally sold out, and utilizing an updated industrial incentive policy to incentivize private sector investment of the next phase and in fact future phases of Coaldale's industrial development. So as we've looked to considerate opportunities for further industrial development in the town over time, we've determined that securing private investment in developing the project through incentivization is a more cost-effective and lower risk approach for the town compared to taking on a new industrial park project using municipal funds. And we have put together a policy which provides for a multi-pronged approach to industrial development incentivization, looking at a number of criteria. Highlights of that policy, and the policies attached to this report, is first for the provision of the potential for cost sharing of internal transportation infrastructure, where a broader industrial community benefit is identified. So additional funding to support a developer can be provided as part of the sharing of federal and provincial grants associated with the project on top of a potential town contribution should the town acquire any grants to do so. Second, the provision for recommendations to support the potential for offsite levy reductions or, and this is of particular importance, the allowance for delays in the payment of levies to provide cash flow support to potential developers, and to provide cash flow support where they are installing internal infrastructure. The reductions would be in line with an allowance in a soon-to-be updated offsite levy bylaw, allowing for payment deferral or reduction, and administration is forecasting presentation of an updated offsite levy bylaw next month. Third, construction incentive program of 3%, which would be a 3% incentive following construction of a new industrial building, 3% being 3% of the value of that building construction. Incentives, in this case, to be paid in some combination of cash or credit against future taxes at administration's discretion. So this means that if a new industrial building is constructed on a lot with a value of, say, $1 million, we provide a $30,000 incentive back to that builder upon project completion. So potentially that could look at something like $15,000 of cash incentive and $15,000 credit against future taxes. So the modernization of this policy is designed both to support existing West Industrial Area Structure Plan and also serve as a guide for future privately funded industrial expansion in years to come. So it's not intended to be exclusively to the project being undertaken currently by 845 Developments, which connects the existing industrial park to Highway 845. The idea behind incentivizing private development of large-scale industrial lots is fundamentally about removing the need for public investment, which is say mainly town investment, to bring new industrial lots online. You'll recall that the existing town of Coaldale Industrial Park was developed by the town, sold over a period of many years, with periods of low or limited uptake and relatively rapid sales over the past 2 to 4 years. And while there's advantages, obviously, in being the developer and engaging in this type of development, most notably the potential for profitable returns, the flip side is that this type of development does come with the risk of losses, and also of note for the town, prolonged periods of cash flow restriction. So above that, engaging in this type of project, even when it's profitable, would mean that between securing land and paying upfront for development costs, the town might need to eat into the vast majority of the town's debt capacity in search of those profitable needs, likely for a period of a decade or more. Doing so could limit the town's ability to engage in other major capital projects over that time. And as such, looking at something like this where incentivization for private development occurs requires a substantially lower cash infusion into these types of projects while delivering the same result, which is to say new serviced industrial land within the town. The continued expansion of Coaldale's industrial tax base, continued expansion of local job opportunities for Coaldale residents, which supports further residential development. And administration's position is, given the town's general preference for lower risk endeavors compared to private sector investors, this path is preferable. So the structure of the policy and the way it's been designed is to tie these types of incentives to outcomes. So the installation of completed infrastructure could result in potential support of that rather than cash up front. We're also looking at, or where buildings are built, largely to fund the incentive for marketing these properties and competing with other jurisdictions like Lethbridge, providing that support against construction. At the back end, where a building is being built and the tax associated with those types of buildings is absolute rather than projected. We feel that providing this type of policy is in line with Council's strategic plan, namely focus on creating a collaborative regulatory environment that attracts business to Coaldale, pursuing funding sources and partnerships to enable our community and economy to grow, and to identify strategies to support town business and achieving economic health. So the financial commitment associated with the policy is difficult to provide. There's not a single answer to say it's a certain amount of money. It ultimately depends on what is developed and what support is provided. So when we looked at looking at, say, the 845 developments section of the industrial park, 68 developable acres, when we look at applying that 3% policy, 3% incentive policy on construction, we looked at that and assumed, say, $600,000 an acre for construction. That would result in the payment either through cash or tax incentives of about $1.2 million over whatever period that is. That would also mean at current tax rates that we'd see increases of approximately $500,000 per year every year going forward. So from a return on investment perspective, it's fairly substantial. As far as contributions to infrastructure, we would look at that on a case-by-case basis. Again, there are criteria within the policy that we consider needs to provide a broader benefit. So where, for example, infrastructure provides a benefit to the existing industrial area and provides support to those businesses, we would look at potential cost sharing on that. But again, we'd structure on cost sharing based on the completion of the project rather than based on funding during the project. That reduces the town's risk of those things, make sure that we're only funding projects that are fully built and meet town standards. Provide a number of potential decision options, and our recommendation is for council to approve the industrial incentive policy as presented.
Thank you, Cameron. So has the town ever done anything like this before with any other previous developments?
So we have an existing industrial incentive policy that is simply a 1% cash rebate for potential projects, and it doesn't provide for any of the additional details, which doesn't mean that the town can't provide those incentives, but we don't have it as an existing policy.
Go ahead, Caleb.
And prior to that, we had what was called a 3 for Free program, where upon completion of improvements on an industrial property or a commercial property, the developer or in this case, the building property owner would receive a 0% tax bill for the first 3 years on the municipal portion. So we've looked at that would have been in the 2013 to 2017 time frame for that 3 for Free program.
Thank you. We'll open it up to council. Any questions, comments for Cameron? Councillor Beekman.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Cameron, just curious, do you think that by opening by increasing our incentives, obviously we're making our lots more appealing to potential industry coming to Coaldale, but do we run the risk of, in a privately developed area, just going to use 845 as an example, that's the example brought up here, that we're now increasing the appetite for relocation out here, it just increases their ability to sell for more. Essentially, when our incentive program is increasing their profitability, and where do we find that balance?
Yeah, it certainly provides for that. So a lot of industrial parks are developed by municipalities because municipalities are generally happy to sell land at a loss in order to bring in the tax revenue, the relatively, we might call high margin tax revenue associated with industrial development. And so for private developers, part of what this does is provide them with an opportunity to be more profitable. When you look at this though, realistically speaking, if we look at the 845 development, for example, the way this might be structured is with incentives to, say, extend 12th Avenue to provide for that ring road where our existing industrial park would then be connected to the 845 and provide that incentive. The largest single cost we're looking at here is with that 3%. That 3% incentive against construction. And what that does is it allows industrial lots in Coaldale, when you're competing with, say, Lethbridge or other areas, to show potential buyers where the ultimate constructed value is for them out here relative to other locations. And so if Coaldale is certainly a generally less desirable than Lethbridge on a dollar per dollar basis, there needs to be some discount to doing business Coaldale relative to Lethbridge for most, and obviously not for everyone. And there has always been. It provides developers an opportunity to still develop at the relatively high cost associated with developing today and still forecast a reasonable profit in that potential opportunity.
Okay, yeah, that would just be my biggest concern on that, is by offering way too much incentive, we're driving the value of that land up to where they can raise the price and potentially scare off investors. If we're selling the land, we control that table, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. The flip side is the cost of, say for example, just the 845 piece, the cost of developing that, if the town were to do it, would be somewhere in the $15 million range, which would mean that if we engage in that type of work, there would be no additional capital projects for probably a decade.
Yep.
Kaylin has a comment.
And just one more in terms of Mary, your question about the past practice. In previous developments, there have been examples where the municipality has shared in arterial roadways, like a cost sharing agreement. The percentage would be largely dependent on the number of traffic flows coming from that development versus general outlying traffic from the rest of the community. So in terms of one of the highlights of this policy, there have been examples where we have cost shared on an arterial roadway if other elements or areas of the community have benefited from that roadway.
Okay, thank you. And then while you're talking on this, so where would we find this money in the budget as it is now?
For like
the incentive, like
the 3% one?
Yes. So like, as per Cameron's report, $30,000 back to the lot owner upon project completion. So where's the funds going to come from for that?
So my understanding, the cash payments come out of the industrial land reserve funds when those are provided. One of the things that we wanted to make sure here is when we go to that 3%, we want to balance the available cash on hand versus taking the payment against future taxes to be earned, and that's why we want the opportunity administratively to look at every application, see what our cash position is, and determine whether or not a future tax credit versus a cash payment is appropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
And in terms of how the deal is structured, the building improvements would have to take place and be complete before the rebate would be dispersed. So you're looking at, bridging the cash flow for a year and a half or 2 years until such time that the taxes just become revenue for the municipality.
Yeah, if I may expand on that. So the way it works is the developer contacts the town when it's complete, which triggers the assessor to go to the property to determine its valuation. If the assessor's valuation of the property is below what the person who built it is suggesting, then they have an opportunity to say, well, I can show you the appraised value and show you that your assessed value is too low and that the rebate should be higher. The flip side to that coin, of course, is that's going to drive up their future taxes because it's going to adjust their assessment upwards. So that's a choice developers can make.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. To Cameron, would there be off-site levies on that property? So then that was probably where we could take the refund back out of for the 2 years?
Yeah, so one of the prongs of this policy, in fact, addresses the off-site levies. And so one of the major challenges associated with a development like this is the upfront requirement of those levies. And so one of those prongs talks about potentially deferral of levies. And so what that means is if it's calculated that $200,000, for example, is owed in levies, rather than taking that up front, we might defer that to the point where a sale has occurred, and so the developer can fund the levies through the sale of the lot, up to a period of time, let's say a 5-year limit or what have you attached to that. And that's huge for a developer because rather than borrowing, say, $3 million to fund the levy payment, they can fund it from their sales, and that's a huge cash flow advantage for them, given the cost of borrowing on a project like this might be in the 12 to 15% range typically.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Cam, for this this proposal, I like the fact that you're tying it to outcomes, and that's an important aspect. My question is two-pronged. One is the 3%. Is that just a number that you have evaluated as a right number to use?
That's the number. Thank you for the question. That's the number that we've used. It does tie back a little bit to historically the 3 for 3.
3 for 3.
Value
Okay.
being that it's approximately a 1% tax rate in play. But it's the number that we've used in our discussions with the development community that they feel would be a substantial incentive, but a reasonable incentive.
So just a couple more questions here. One, what are your timelines on this? Are you looking at a 3-year sunset clause on this, or are you in perpetuity, or where are we at with this?
Thank you. Yeah. So obviously, approving the policy this evening, there's some immediate projects on the horizon that would take advantage of it. It's very important that we be very clear that a policy cannot be, from a legal perspective, cannot be applied to a single project. So this is not a policy that is specific for the 845 developments project. It is a policy that we're looking at and saying for industrial development within the town. Now, the policy as it reads does talk about large lot development, so it isn't intended to be applied if someone wants to develop 4 acres of land. The intention is this is going to be for larger lots where they're building municipal infrastructure and creating sort of real value where it doesn't currently exist. But if, for example, another quarter section came online, whether through annexation, the policy would exist until council decides that it doesn't anymore. So we could certainly return and have a discussion in 2 years' time and determine whether or not we wanted to continue with it. But the intention of the policy and my understanding from discussing with our legal counsel is that we really need to look at this as being the plan moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that Deputy Mayor Pickering answered the question about, or asked a question about offsite levies. On that note, are lot prices that are going to be fixed at the current rate, or is that going to be established somehow?
So we would have an opportunity at the development agreement stage where we're looking at applying these to provide for a fixing of rates potentially, where these elements of this policy are applied. Where those rates are going to be fixed is a little bit in flux. I think when we started looking at this project 2 years ago, and you look at looking at the cost of development now versus then, the rates are going to have to be a little bit higher, but we're going to have to take a look at what's reasonable within the market. And then if we provide for these incentives, the idea has been that the per acre rate is then established, and any increase to that rate provides for the town to potentially recoup some of its incentives.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to confirm, as per the policy, it's for a minimum of 40 acres.
Correct, yes.
Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, the following options are that we adopt the policy as presented. That's option 1. Number 2, adopt the policy subject to amendments. Number 3, table the policy. Or number 4, reject the policy. Does anybody care to sponsor one of those options? One more time for the industrial incentive policy C024. We have 4 options. 1 is to adopt a policy. Number 2 is to adopt it with amendments. Number 3 is to table the policy, or number 4 is to reject the policy. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I haven't heard any amendments here this evening, so I'll move to adopt the policy as presented.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Reese opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you. Cameron, we're going to give you a break for a minute.
Awesome.
Moving on to new business, agenda item 8.1. We have the Coaldale 5K Family Fun Run 2023. We have our Community Services Coordinator, Caitlin Davis, presenting. And then also in the room this evening, we have Jacob Weeb. He's the Marketing Director for the Colville Family Fun Run if there's any questions that Caitlin can't answer. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me tonight. The intent of this staff report is to inform Council and the community about the upcoming 12th Annual Colville 2023 Family Fun Run event, and that we request that Council continue to support the tradition of paying the registration fee for Town Council and staff that are willing to participate in the run. Previously in past years, Council has approved a coverage of $30 fee for Town Council and staff to participate, and this is from the Town Council's budget. So the Family Fun Run this year will be on April 22nd, 2023. It will be their 12th annual. The Town of Colville has always provided support from the beginning through various levels, but in 2017 we became a platinum sponsor, which is $1,000, and additionally we have always continued to encourage staff participation with the payment of their registration fees. And this year the entry fee is $20 per adult participant and an additional $12 for a t-shirt. So the funds generated from this run are donated to a local community enhancement project, and once again a portion of this year's proceeds are being put towards developing the grounds adjacent to Pinnacle Park. Plans for the space include a street hockey arena, sitting area, walking path, and improved landscaping. In addition, $2 from every entry will also go to the Colville Food Bank. So the financial impact of this would be projected to be up to $640 if the participation fee and t-shirts are paid for. In the past, there's been as few as a handful of Town Council and staff members participate, and as many as 20. I believe there was 20 last year, with I think 6 of those being council themselves. Once again, the funds would come from council's other professional services budget. So we have presented 3 options this year.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. So can you just go over one more time? So the money would come from what part of the budget?
So it comes from Town Council's budget under the line item Other Professional Services. That's what it came from previously. I don't know how or you guys know your budget, but it's just one of the line items under your guys's.
So the entire team would come out of that, not just council members?
Yes, that's correct. That's what it has been since we looked it back to like 2018, and that's the account that it came out of.
And when was the last time the town was actually, like you mentioned, we were platinum sponsor once?
We've been platinum sponsor since 2017. So started in 2017 as a platinum sponsor, and then there was a break kind of during COVID. But then as of last year, I think we continued to be a platinum sponsor again at $1,000. And that, I was told, has already been budgeted every year.
I just wanted clarification. So the platinum sponsorship is going to go through regardless. This is just for the participation.
Yes, yeah, this is strictly just a participation fee and t-shirts if you choose to do both.
So it's $400 without a t-shirt, or $640 with a t-shirt for.
Yes, yeah, because the t-shirt is an extra $12 per participant. So just the difference would be approximately $240, and that's if 20 people once again participate.
Okay, so this would be a case of up to 640 based on 20.
That's true, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So just to get this clear, we paid the $1,000 plus the other registration, right?
Thank you, Bill, yeah.
And then, so our name goes on the t-shirt as the platinum sponsor.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Jacob is waving his head up and down, so yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, he would know all those insights about it.
Sorry, Steve. I don't know exactly at what capacity we do the different levels have different sizes. Excuse me, logos.
Jacob, I'll just get you to come up to the chair so the mic can pick you up.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I don't know exactly. This is my first year doing it, so I'm just trying to get familiar with everything, so I don't have all the information with me. I didn't prepare anything, excuse me for that. But the t-shirts, all the sponsors have different dollar amounts, and the more you pay, the more advertising you get, and with different size logos on all of the different mediums.
I'm looking at the platinum sponsorship here. So for $1,000, you get our logo on the t-shirt. You get a personalized banner for your business. You get a medium logo on the event website, banner and posters, and you get 4 complimentary race entries. So that's already being budgeted, you said, $1,000. So we're looking for the 2 options, a $640 ask with t-shirts or $400 without t-shirts. Any further questions? Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion that we go with option 2, where we approve the following. So up to 20 with t-shirts for up to maximum of $640.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion on table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Good luck with your race, or Jacob.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Caitlin. Okay. Moving on to agenda item under new business 8.2, we have our Director of Growth and Investment returning to the presentation table, Cameron Mills, to give a staff report on the 2 Billion Trees program, call for projects. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Appreciate it. Appropriate section. Okay, so purpose of the report is to provide council with an overview of the 2 Billion Tree program and seek direction for possible initiatives to focus on for future Coaldale applications. So the 2 Billion Tree program had a first call for proposals back in February of 2022 and is opening again for calls in 2023. One element of the program is open, the other is not. However, we are anticipating it will open in the future. The program aims to see the planting of 2 billion trees across Canada through targeted initiatives that are open to a variety of agencies. As I mentioned, there are 2 streams. So there's the urban and suburban stream, which funds the planting of trees directly. This requires, at the smallest scale size for the program, to fund the planting of a minimum of 10,000 trees per year in order to be eligible for this funding. Trees must be in and around urban areas, and applicants, as part of their application, need to explain how the planting contributes to human well-being and environmental co-benefits. The application needs to be tied to a project directly for which supporting documentation is available. Second is the capacity building stream, and this is the stream that is not currently open. This stream, and this is the stream that was awarded to Tabor as part of the February 2022 submissions. And this provides for funding of $150,000 a year for 2 years towards building organizational capacity to support tree planting. Eligible activities under this stream include capacity building to encourage and facilitate involvement in planning and undertaking tree planting, including knowledge building and transfer, training, and outreach. Capacity building related to management, protection, and monitoring of trees and forests, including knowledge building and transfer, training, and outreach, and planting and management of trees and forests as part of a broader capacity building project. Projects submitted in this stream need to demonstrate that funded activities will support efforts and reduce barriers for the applicant to be able to participate in the 2 Billion Tree program moving forward. Either program could theoretically be applied to a major tree planting initiative in Coaldale. For example, if a tree planting initiative was undertaken as part of the landscaping to the east of the new school and recreation center site in northwest Coaldale. Theoretically. Applying Stream 1, the Stream 1 requires 10,000 trees per year. Most programs that have accessed these funds to date appear to be using seedlings rather than planting sort of a 5 or a 7-year mature tree. And with that said, in preparing the report, the concept of a planting area was discussed, and we looked at a space there. We're looking at approximately a 12-acre site, roughly east of the high school, to provide some sense of that. In consultation with the town's arborist suggests that typically sort of a heavily planted park space in that area for that space would be about 500 trees, which is obviously substantially less than 10,000. That provides for planting, again, in sort of a relatively dense park type setting where trees are expected to survive once planted, and where the goal is to have trees that don't encroach on the canopy of other trees, so to allow trees to gain their full height and to not encroach on one another. For more urban forest type development, trees per acre is something that we considered. So we looked at a number of resources to try to get a sense of how do we get to 10,000 was sort of the idea. So if we look at planting trees within that space, 10 feet apart in rows of 10 feet between each row, say like a 10 by 10 grid system, that provides for 436 trees per acre. So within that space, that's approximately 5,200 trees. Individual types of trees differ in terms of required spacing, but the guidelines that we saw in terms of documents from these types of programs suggest a 20 by 20 sort of planting is pretty typical in terms of close planting, and that would provide for about 1,300 trees in this space to give you a sense of the difference. Either way, within that space alone, 10,000 becomes something that is difficult with that project alone to consider. Did reach out to the folks operating the program. They don't provide for a phone number on the website or much indication of how funds are paid or other project details, which are typical with grant websites. However, we did manage to connect with them. They don't allow for phone calls, interestingly enough, once the program is open, but they did coordinate with us via email and a few questions. One of the questions we did ask was about whether or not inclusion in that 10,000 number could include the provision of trees to individual landowners, either as a free tree or as a subsidized or at a subsidized rate. The indication from that is that that would not be eligible under the program. Looking at Stream 2 and considering the same project, Stream 2 to the Burn project would require that the project be modified and expanded to include a significant community engagement component, and would likely require additional staffing in order to be feasible. So project planning and objectives would need to align with the 2 Billion Trees program priorities as they relate to capacity building. A detailed time frame would need to be laid out with achievable deadlines set in place. A detailed budget for the project would need to be prepared. We need realistic standards for the benefits and objectives of the program and make sure they're in compliance with the 2 Billion Trees program. The town would need to illustrate its capacity to deliver the project by means of financial leveraging community partnerships and resources. The town would need to provide reasons why and how a capacity building project would enable continued participation in the 2 Billion Trees program. While that above is certainly feasible, it should be noted that a substantial portion of the available $300,000 in funding would not be directed at planting, but would rather be used to fund expanded organizational capacity to engage in the initiative. So in the case of Tabor, the funding is applied to public participation by hosting groups for tree planting days involving local school children and local partners and stakeholder groups. These projects require substantial human resources in order to be involved. So these aren't projects that just sort of happen. So we would need dedicated park staff dealing directly with the public and engaging with the public on these projects. And that is largely what the program would fund. So as I mentioned here, in order to engage in the program, we'd fundamentally be looking at better understanding the technical and volunteer coordinating staff required to move forward with a project where the community is heavily involved in the planting and design of that particular project. As I mentioned, we have reached out to Natural Resources Canada for further guidance. We've received some. We'll continue to coordinate with them. What we are interested in understanding is whether or not pursuit of one or another of these streams is appropriate for the town of Coaldale if we're prepared to provide the resources associated with the program, or if we are successful in achieving the grant, or even in leading up to the grant, there's a substantial amount of mine and Russ's time that would be involved in preparing that analysis and that ultimate report. So we are fundamentally looking for council's direction on that. We understand that at a high level, the program certainly meets some of the town's criteria and is certainly interesting. But it's important for us to understand that this is not a grant where it's simply an application for cash, and then that cash provides us with the ability to purchase trees. It goes far beyond that. With that, I'd be happy to answer some questions. I have Thomas Anderson with me. Tom has spent more time reading the many documents associated with the program than I have. I've done some as well, but Tom's going to provide me with some support if I don't understand some of the ins and outs of the program. So, his expertise.
So I have a couple of questions before I open up to council. So do we know how big these trees are, what kind of tree they are?
I have been asking. I haven't gotten the level of clarity that a phone call would allow me to get to very quickly, since I have to ask and they respond, and then I have to ask again. At this point, my understanding of the program is that largely what has been funded is seedling level, or so either seeds or very, very small trees that will grow over a period of 20 years or more into sort of being.
So if I was to say 3 feet, I'd be optimistic.
Based on what has been funded to date, I would say so. It doesn't mean that the program couldn't theoretically do more, but I haven't seen any examples from the couple hours I've spent looking that suggest that it's sort of, usually when we plant in a park, I believe 5 to 7 years is the typical age of a tree that we're planting. Not an area in which I have any expertise, to be clear. And Ryan, our arborist, is a very busy person who's very generous with his time, but I'm trying not to take up too much of it. So 3 years might be on the high side for what has been planted to date.
And okay, you just answered that. Any questions for Cameron? Councilor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. My question for you is there any other streams of grant funding available for larger trees or anything else out there?
One of the grants I actually applied for, not connected with this one, is actually through Tremendous Communities Canada, and I will hear back from them in March for a $10,000 grant possibly, and that one had no limits on tree sizes. I sent a couple of options in the grant application package.
Perfect.
Councilor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I like the idea of trying to find trees and getting trees for the town, but I go back to conversation with Clive Schupmeyer in 2014, where he mentioned a couple of things. Number one is that we have about 900 trees in town, and I'm not too sure if that's on private land or public lands. It would include the birds of prey, but I think that was sort of the inventory that he came up with a conclusive number of total trees in Coaldale, and that would be before annexation, of course. The second point he made is that to value those trees would be around $2 million, is what he surmised back then. But to get to this part, I don't know how we're going to fit 10,000 trees in a community like ours, especially the footprints that might be available to us. So my other option would be, and I mentioned in an email to council earlier, is that an idea is to work with the county and trying to identify the link pathway for trees that might help that project.
Go ahead, Kayla.
Just one logistical issue with this program is who's funding the irrigation for these trees. It's a great idea to have it along the pathway, but there's no budget consideration nor available water to provide irrigation for plantings like that.
Okay. Yeah.
We've struggled with trying to keep the trees that we do have around the northwest part of the Molloy, because there wasn't an underground sprinkler system or even above ground irrigation system. So we've had to replace a couple of those trees, truck watering them for the early stages, hoping that their roots will grow down deep enough to where there is water. But irrigation is a big consideration anytime you look at mass tree planting, because you don't want them to die after planting them, nor did the program funders. So is underground sprinklers, irrigation covered as part of this grant, or how, like what's eligible?
Thank you. Certainly could be. So we actually reached out to the town of Tabor and sort of took a look at their application, for example. And so they're looking at their trout pond space and using the funds towards that. And there is a potential for funding some of the irrigation within that space within the dollars. And we're looking at what they're committing to and assuming that that's a reasonable level of commitment in order to gain the support of the program. A lot of their application is tied to, like I say, this community outreach and sort of the education component and the long-term outreach component. And so for us, the difficulty here is that we have a single arborist on staff whose schedule is full. So to add 15 hours a week of working with school children is not foreseeable for that position. So realistically, for this program to work for Coaldale, we'd be funding an additional arborist type position, which is sort of something that exists going forward beyond, potentially beyond the 2-year grant application. And then there's certainly, I suppose we could definitely. I imagine that within the $300,000 there would be some potential for things like diverting some of the funding towards irrigation and the purchase of trees. It's difficult for us to ascertain exactly what that is without seeing the detailed design of the project, which we just don't have at this point. But sort of as I'm envisioning it, could we find $20,000 within this to direct towards irrigation? That might be reasonable, but it would not be $300,000 directed towards irrigation.
And we would get these 10,000 trees all in one shot the first year?
If we went with Stream 1, it has to be like, here's our plan for planting 10,000 trees this year, which is, I don't know how many trees there are in Coaldale. I believe there's substantially more than 900, but 10,000 is a tremendously large number of trees.
And my last question is then, and Kaylin brought up a good point, like irrigation, and I was like in the 845 industrial project, they're going to have land that's not going to be used for quite a few years based on their inventory requirements. Like if we were to plant them and make a nursery, that we could use those down the road. But again, then we have to look at irrigating those trees. And for myself, if I'm landscaping, I don't buy the 1 gallon pots, I buy the 5 gallon. It's got 5-foot trees. At least you got something to work with right away. But that concerns me if these trees are going to come, they're only a foot tall or something like that. Ultimately, for me, I thought where we could use this was in the school area. Obviously the berm and the whole parks, green spaces out there. But back to funding for that area, like Palliser, and Kaylin can speak on this as well. We're still waiting to hear back from Palliser how much funds they're going to have available for landscaping, that we might be able to borrow some for that growth.
Yeah, I had a good discussion with the Palliser project side, so they are looking into it. They don't have that information available, but I'm hoping to hear back from them the next couple of months on that.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up again for questions, comments. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Well, based on what you guys are saying and based on what I've read, I mean, having seedlings, that's not what we're after. So I think that we should maybe just wait until this grant funding that you hear from it back in March. I think that's what we should do.
Okay, with that being said, would you care to sponsor the available motion?
I will sponsor a motion that council receive the 2 billion trees report for information.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Tom, keep on a hunt for those trees, please.
For sure.
Moving on to information items. 12.1, the SEWA press release. That was exciting news for all the work that's been going into the project, and Coaldale as being a founding member of that, and our representative on the board is Kim Craig. So we're looking forward to next steps, and Councillor Chapman is the alternate on that board. Do you have any comments on that, Councillor Chapman?
I don't.
Okay.
Glad to hear the announcement.
Okay, thank you. And we have the Barons and Rika Warner FCSS board meeting minutes from December 7th, 2022. And we have a letter from Member of Parliament Rachel Thomas regarding the Youth Advisory Board applications that, Kaylin, is there a way that we can help her with that to maybe promote that on our social media?
Yeah, I think we can.
Okay, thank you.
I need a motion to receive for information.
All the information on this, please.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Chapman makes a motion to receive the information items 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That concludes the open portion of the meeting. I'll be requiring a motion that council move to go into closed session at 7:20 p.m. accordance with section 197-4-B of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for items 13.1, 13.3, 13.4, subject to section 16, business interests of a third party. Items 13.2, subject to section 17, personal privacy. Item 13.4, subject to section 25, economic and other interests of a public body. So I can get someone to sponsor a motion that council move to go into closed session at 7:21 p.m. Deputy Mayor Pickering, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll take a 10-minute break.